hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and welcome to The Hypnotist. And you're going to be joining myself and Matt, who has been on the show before. We're going to be having a chat about music and songs and lyrics and just how useful they are at perhaps being sneaky subliminal hypnosis sessions. Because for me, hypnosis is emotion plus suggestion, and there's a lot of emotion in music and there's a lot of suggestion in lyrics. So we're going to be having a chat to explore that. Matt, good to see you again.
Hey, Adam, thank you. Glad to be here.
So when you reached out to me recently just to kind of, it was actually following on from a conversation that we had at Hypnothoughts, where you'd noticed certain themes within certain song lyrics that kind of got you thinking, like maybe they could be used as almost like a Trojan horse or a structure of kind of hypnosis sessions. So before we get into the chat, give a little bit of a backstory as to kind of what led to us having this conversation now.
Do you mean what we talked about, Hypnothoughts, or
yeah,
what
exactly.
we talked about before? Or
yeah.
But at the I don't remember exactly how it got brought up, but I was talking about the song El Paso, and by Marty Robbins, which was, I was trying to relate it to Lily Masco, and there's a scene in El Paso, I'm sorry, in Breaking Bad, where Walter White is driving into town for something. It's towards the end of it, and I apologize, I don't remember what it was, but he was kind of on his, it was going to mean his death, I believe, and he put in the song El Paso, and that whole song is about a cowboy who fell in love with a dancing girl at a cantina in El Paso, and Felina was her name, and she, like, her job was to dance and flirt, and he knew that, and he was in love, and he knew it was in the song. It said, "In vain I can tell," But the long and short of it is he saw someone else dancing with her. He challenged that guy, and they had a quick draw, and he killed the guy he challenged. And then in a panic, he ran, because the presumably, the bar kind of turned on him. So he escaped the posse, and then it's unclear how much time goes by, but at some point he's just like, I don't care if it means my death. I have to see her again, And then so he rides in, and he sees the posse. Where then they're chasing him somehow. It's, again, in song, things don't have to be explained. It just bridges, kind of hypnotically, by either turns of phrase or by music, And so, and that's part of the cool part, is we don't really know, like, how long this been. And then, he sees a puff of smoke. He feels a bullet go into him. He falls off his horse, and he gets up, and he's just running, literally dying. Just, he didn't even know if she's there, right? And so this just obsession in Breaking Bad, presumably, like, Walter White's Felina was the meth, So it was a metaphor for the meth, and I don't remember why he, what that last ride for Walter White was. I literally don't remember those details, but it's, that got me thinking about it. And storytelling is such a big part of hypnosis. And then I wonder if some people don't tell stories because, or explore metaphor because they're afraid that they're not good at it, or they think, oh, I don't have time to read all these great, stories to put that in. And I was just thinking, like, you know, um, is country music, which is just pure storytelling music, like a shortcut, like a NLP version, if you will, right? Of modeling to become a good storyteller. If you can one immerse themselves into that type of music and come out with, metaphors and not only ability to bring a story together, but with turns of phrase to make things more compelling, you know. And that's what I've been sitting with for a long time. And I wanted to talk to you about it because the first Hypno Thoughts that I was at, I think it was the first one you were at, which was the last one at the Orleans. And I attended your was it Nested Loops or just Metaphor on?
Back then it was movie metaphors.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with movies, and I found that actually
I'm obsessed with country music.
Yeah, the storylines in movies could actually be quite powerful mnemonics in a way to structure complex hypnotic protocols and approaches, but actually use the structure of the film that we can kind of contain in our head. And when I think about music, because there was a period of time, must have been about 3 or 4 years ago, where I was trying to get inspiration for hypnosis sessions, because I set my target of doing a daily hypnosis session, but back then I wasn't as busy with clients. So if I didn't have a client, I would find either a movie, song lyrics, or a poem, and then try and convert that into the structure of a hypnosis session.
Wow.
And where I found the Venn diagram totally overlapping is this idea of words are the tools of a poet, a storyteller, a raconteur, a lyricist, a hypnotist. Like words are the building blocks of that. And I think very good hypnotists tend to have big vocabularies. They have a lot of different abilities to use not just the words, but the tonality, inflections, impact, pacing, like all of these things that becomes the difference between someone that's been doing it 10 years and someone that's been doing it 10 days. Even if they did exactly the same technique and exactly the same thing, it would sound entirely different because there is some mastery in terms of all these kind of tiny distinctions built up over time. And what I found is that when I was taking song lyrics and poems rather than movies, because they're shorter, it does require the lyricist or the poet to have like a single word or a single sentence communicates an entire scene that almost becomes like, if it was turned into a movie, that might be a 5-minute scene, but it's just a line. And I was just looking at the lyrics there of El Paso, and it is almost kind of like screenplay kind of language. It's kind of I'm looking at, it's almost like perspective, like riding alone in the dark, looking down at the town, like all of these kind of things. It's kind of like, okay, you're taking a point of view kind of perspective. Well, that's levels of disassociation in hypnotic language. Like you're listening to the music, but then you're imagining him on the horseback when he talks about being shot in the chest.
Yeah.
Like it's not in someone's chest, it's in his chest. It's almost kind of like you're imagining all of this stuff. And I think there's something kind of magical in musical lyrics, and there's a reason why most, and you could say 70-80% of music, the themes are very, very emotive. it's love, it's betrayal, it's obsession, it's, it's intense emotions, because there is something about music that can encapsulate that in a way that if it's just kind of, let's say, less emotive, you lose the kind of connection with the audience, because at some level people are trying to relate themselves into whatever they're hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not only painted with the words, but it's painted with the phrasings, and the the song El Paso just itself is hypnotic anyway, because it's the melody is dum 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 dum,
Mm-hmm.
and out in the West Texas town of El Paso, it's just
Yeah.
there's and what you were saying about, like, one word or something, uh, bridging or creating the whole scene was like the line, in less than a heartbeat my challenge was answered, the handsome young stranger lie dead on the floor. So you just know, down with his hand for the gun that he wore, in less than a heartbeat my then oh, that's what happened, he shot him,
Mm.
and the and then some songs are just very literal. There's really not um well, that song's fairly literal, but like but as another example, like when I was in college, my second time, I was um the what class it was, but it was essentially it was a writing class to teach us, how to cite things and whatnot. And so we went over a lot of classic stories, and she was either reading or telling us a story of, there was, I don't know, like maybe like in the 18 or 1900s, like at least I think, like in the South, the people that had a little bit of money, like once a week, there'd be like a gathering in someone's parlor. There'd be somebody play piano, there'd be dancing and whatnot, and this man would see this woman there, right, and they would just kind of make eyes at each other, and he would get all dressed up to look his best, and she would obviously get dressed up too, but they never talked. She wasn't going to talk because it's the 1800s or
Mm.
something, right? That was not ladylike. But he would just get there, and like he just didn't pull the trigger, right? And so he shows up, the following week, or he misses 1 week or something. She's not there, so he asks, and then whomever he asks says, "Oh, the Johnson boy married her. Yeah, he's you know he just get whatever, came into some money, and blah blah blah, just came in, and it was so quick and all that stuff. Essentially, this guy came in and just took her away,
Mm.
because he pulled the trigger, so to speak, right? And so I was
Snooze, you
listening to
lose, essentially.
that. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
as I was listening to that, I said, "Oh, that's called Elijah." Um, and I said, "Have you ever heard Call Elijah?" I asked my professor that. She said, "No." Like, what is that? I thought it's a song by Hank Williams, and this song is amazing because it's all metaphor. Because it's so the so Kalijah is this wooden Indian, you know, is standing over by the door. Heart was set on a Choctaw maid over in the antique store. So it was once, the old timey cigar store Indians, which they used to have, and it's pretty awful that if you look back at it, with today's eyes, that that those were common, carvings and whatnot, but it was a cigar store Indian, and Indian made also, a statue of some kind. And the whole thing is about like, he always wore his Sunday feathers and carried his tomahawk. Maiden wore her beads and braids. Hoped someday he would talk. So if you picture a cigar store Indian, he's really stoic, not saying anything, but just proud, and then, and the song is just kind of about like, she wishes he would talk, but he doesn't talk. And then one day a wealthy customer bought the Indian maid, took her so far away, poor Kalijah stayed. And then, and that was essentially the story, but the other part is like, standing there, don't ever show a sign, because his heart is made of knotty pine. That's in like, and then the chorus is, poor old Kalijah, you've never got a kiss, poor old Kalijah, you don't know what you missed. Is it any wonder that your face is red, poor old Kalijah, you poor old wooden head? And it, like, to me, that's just a huge metaphor for not only not taking your shot, right, but for just being, too proud, too stubborn. And there's your opportunity is practically begging you, please, just anything, do something.
Yeah.
And you do nothing. And then,
and that's so relatable, because I think most people have had the experience of the window of opportunity of something was open, and it closes, and they're just left with what could have been. And I always think, as far as regrets go, people regret way more the things they didn't do that they wish they did, compared to the things they did do and they wish they didn't. Like, it's a permanent open loop of what could have been. It's the sliding doors thing, where a whole new timeline opens up, and you never know how that timeline would have gone, because you never actually did the thing that could have explored it. And there's something powerful, and that song encapsulates, that. And yeah, it is an amazing. And I imagine there's a lot of people that have had those moments, that listen to that, and then it gives them a flashback of the moments in their life where they could have, they should have, but they didn't. And that's the magic. It's almost like timeline therapy in a song.
Yeah. And the song is haunting, because it's in a E minor, and it's boom, 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 and the sort of the chords kind of ring out, and it's almost like a heartbeat, but it's supposed to be Native American drums, of course, but and then Hank Williams, singing it, had a way of, carrying the emotion through. They called him the hillbilly Shakespeare, and and so in and as you were saying, and that's what I was thinking too, in songs, if you don't have time to read, the book, in 3 minutes you can get immersed into something. Or if you don't have time to watch a 2-hour movie or 3-hour movie, you can kind of immerse yourself, in song. And and that's what I was thinking. I didn't know, like, is that something that could be taught to other people, or is it just beyond, like, hey, listen to music to get better at this, and just look at that?
When I looked at movie metaphors, I kind of looked at it in the sense of, how could I take almost like accepted hypnotherapeutic techniques and protocols, and then find a movie that kind of match that. So
Oh,
like
okay.
with regression to cause, for example, most people have seen at least one time machine movie, whether it's Back to the Future or something like that, or Butterfly Effect, where
Mhm.
there's this idea that you can go back to a moment and change it. So that can be quite a powerful metaphor if people are not comfortable with that, or they want to find a way to bridge the experience. They could say, "You ever seen a time machine movie?" And then, "Oh yeah, I've seen this." Okay, well, what's your favorite one? So they're already building rapport. They're already connecting with a framework that the client is already aware of, and
Yeah.
then they can use that. Or it might be, for example, let's say parallel universes. So there's a few movies that kind of have that kind of theme, whether it's kind of sliding doors where there's two timelines or there's multiverse, kind of things. And it's kind of like, okay, that then can become a bridge to say, well, of all the different realities, let's go to the most resourceful version of you, or let's go to the version of you that's already solved this problem and figure out how they solved it. So I think through my lens, so that would be one approach. And then the other approach is like, how do you create brand new hypnotherapeutic protocols from the structure of a movie that isn't accepted? So, for example, the Chris Nolan film Tenet, he has this temporal pincer movement where he goes backwards and forwards in time at the same time. And it's like, I've never seen that in any kind of timeline technique. So it becomes something new that you can approach. So it might be, for example, that song lyrics or the song could become either the suggestion or the structure, or it could even be linked to a post hypnotic suggestion. So, for example, let's say someone likes the song Fast Car by Tracy Chapman, okay,
Mhm.
and they're not happy with their life at this particular point, then you could have the post hypnotic suggestion and say, whenever you hear that song, it's going to give you a real feeling of hope and possibility that if you decide to change your life, you're one decision away from doing that. At which point you've given that suggestion, and then the next time they hear that song, what if that 6 weeks from now becomes the trigger for them to make a major life decision that takes their life in a good direction? So I think it's incredibly versatile in terms of what you can do. You can either have the lyrics as suggestions, you can link the song to a post hypnotic suggestion, or you can take a metaphor. Let's say someone's struggling with addiction. You can take the themes of Hotel California, and then you could say, okay, like it feels like you're trapped. It feels like you can't leave. And then you could take the essence of that and then engineer it into an empowering metaphor where actually they do get to leave. But I think what would be required to do that is either if you're using the hypnosis from the lyrics, the client doesn't
Mhm.
even need to know what song you're thinking about. It's just a
Right.
mnemonic to help you do it. But if you're using it because the client already has an affinity with that song, then it's part of the diagnostic and the calibration element that
Yeah.
they know the song. And maybe they say a song in session one, you do some homework, listen to it, and then you turn that into something in session two, and
Hmm.
they're like blown away by it because they've heard it 100 times, and now it has an entirely different meaning. So there's the opportunity to reframe something that they've already got an emotional association with and then make it empowering in some way.
As you were saying that, I was thinking like, the kind of country music that I like, and I mean, it's available in folk music and certainly hip hop. And but as as I was explaining a little earlier, I was immersed into it like for like 2 or 3 years, and it really like it sunk in with me. But my um, there's way more people. There's way more plausible references, from movies than there is from like the 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 songs I'm listening to, which are quite old. You know what I mean? So as I was thinking about that, um, yeah, unless the person really has an affinity for such a song. But I wonder if there's something, like a training opportunity of, looking for metaphors, farming for metaphors in music.
I think there is, on the basis that I mean, we said like 5 years ago I did that movie metaphor kind of training in Orleans. I'm doing a movie metaphor one in November in the UK Hypnosis conference. So I think there's a curiosity and a desire to take metaphors from a thing. I like Dale Turnbull's stuff where he actually kind of uses the kind of the three-dimensional realm of how they describe metaphors, and that becomes a framework. So I think music totally becomes that, because it's either a source of inspiration, it's a mnemonic tool so that the average hypnotherapist can take their favorite songs and then attach the structure of hypnosis sessions within the structure of the lyrics, so then they're well more equipped to kind of do that. Or it becomes a rapport building Trojan horse exercise for the client, so that the music gives them the experience. I think there's so many ways, because for me metaphor is one of the most versatile and powerful tools that exists. And one of the main reasons that I think lots of therapists don't use metaphors is this feeling that they have to remember all the metaphors, and some of the metaphors might seem a bit cliche, like the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. And it's kind of like, well, what if the client doesn't like bugs, or what if they don't, that doesn't resonate with them? So I think where possible, it's great to kind of find the metaphor that the client is already on board with and utilize that, rather than the therapist gives them a metaphor. So I think there's a lot of power in that. I was curious though, because you said something to me the other day. You said that The Gambler by Kenny Rogers could be almost a hypnotic delivery that could help with almost any issue. Now that's a
I really do believe that.
that's a high like a high value statement. There's a lot of promise in that. And I've got the lyrics up on my screen here, so I'm just curious. And I had a listen just before we connected as well. And
I'm going to pull the lyrics up to you for reference.
Yeah, and I think most people have heard the phrase, you've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away. Like, everyone's heard of that, but I have a feeling that there's parts of that song that people aren't even aware of that could be, powerful.
Yeah. Hang on. I just got excited the way you got excited when you started talking about movies. You went like this. I knew you were the person to talk to about this. So I was so inspired by that talk, Adam, and I don't watch nearly as many movies, as I used to. But like maybe there's somewhere to go with this. But yeah, so I have the lyrics up. What are the ones that when you said there's the obvious ones, but like what were the not so obvious ones for you?
When I heard that song, I was reminded of a podcast that I listened to with is it Lex Friedman? I forget his name. I think it's Lex Friedman. And who's that Canadian poker player?
You know what? I think I saw that episode, and I don't know. I think I watched it just based on poker player.
Let me Google it now, because that's going to create an open loop. Is
it a woman?
No, it's Daniel Negreanu is the episode, and he was kind of being grilled on his kind of psychology and kind of what helped him, and he said it's kind of like the lyrics of that song really is the framework of his poker strategy. It's kind of like,
is that what he said?
Yeah, like there's nuance in the sense that reading the tells, which for me as a hypnotherapist, I don't play a lot of poker, like that sensory acuity, like what the client tells you, not in their words, but in their facial expressions, eye movements, that tells you everything. and know when to hold them, know when to fold them. And like I invest, and I still haven't learnt that fully. Like there is a time that you take profit and you walk away, and there is a time where your ego gets involved, and then you just are hoping that like something kind of changes. So, you know, I think poker for me is a great metaphor for life anyway.
Yeah.
But when I heard the lyrics, I was taken back because I was doing a half marathon when I was listening to that podcast episode. So it almost kind of teleported me back, and I was kind of thinking, yeah, there's clearly a lot of wisdom in those lyrics, but honestly, I haven't heard it enough to be able to kind of maybe extract the value like you could.
Well, you know, the other thing is for like um as a hypnotist, you know, and wanting to get good at, you know, your patter, you know, and searching for like, you know, how many, you know, Erickson scripts can I read, or, you know, that type of thing. But if you look at like how ambiguous this song is, you know, um, where the, let's see, I think, like, I love this part here. You know, said I made a life out of reading people's faces, knowing what the cards were by the way they held their eyes. You don't mind me saying, I can see you're out of aces. For a taste of your whiskey, I'll give you some advice. And so, like, you know, I can see you're out of aces, you know, is a wonderful turn of phrase, obviously something bothering the, you know, the narrator, right? And then this part, I handed my bottle, he drank down my last swallow, then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light. Like that's such a, I wouldn't say that's a poker player thing, but that's, you know, poker, nobody wants their kid to grow up to be a poker player, right? Just like nobody wants their kid to grow up to be a car salesman. Like, you know, my dad was a car salesman, but that's such a, that's such, that's not a scammy thing. What's the word I'm looking for? That's, I don't know, such a slick thing to do, you know? And so, but when he gets serious, he just says like, if you're going to play the game, boy, you got to learn to play it right. Oh, wow. So you can just imagine like, well, that says nothing. That says absolutely nothing. But if you're in trance, like, yeah, play it right. That's, ooh, you could just see that landing. You know what I mean?
But it's also a truism, isn't it? That
Yeah, of course. Of course.
even though that's kind of common sense, like whatever you do, do it properly.
Mhm.
How many people are half-heartedly doing whatever they call their profession or whatever they call their thing at real cost? I mean, there's an opportunity cost to be doing a career that you don't want to be doing, or to be
Yes.
be in a relationship that you don't want to be in, and that element of like, if you're going to do it right. Like it's such a powerful suggestion, because it's always going to be true. Like if you are, then you should hold yourself to a higher standard is quite powerful. But you're right, it doesn't say how to do it right. It just says that you should
Right.
do it right, which is kind of like saying, you know, it's almost like raising the stakes in poker. It's kind of like, okay, you're either in or you're out, but you can't be sitting on the fence anymore.
Yeah. And it's, that can apply to anything. And it doesn't really say anything specific. So who knows what right is? Because if you tell somebody this is how you play the game, you do it this way, then you know their critical mind is going to be like, well, no, I'm going to do it this way, you know. But that's what I'm saying. It's just so hypnotic. And then when I don't play poker. I don't even like I have so many failures as a man, Adam, and like one of them is I have no idea. I don't know how to play poker, right? But um when I think of the chorus, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. I think like one of, again, that's pretty obvious, but I think like one of the wisest things in this chorus is you never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There's time enough for counting when the dealing is done. So, from a literal standpoint, if you're counting your money, you're not paying attention, or could make you look weak, like, or, if you're showing emotion by counting your money or something. But I was thinking, like, if you watch like, sports, boxing, MMA, whatever, but like, I think of boxing as like, someone gets their person hurt, and then they step back to admire their work,
Celebrating too early.
or they clown, and then the other person shakes the cobwebs off and knocks them out. That's how I hear that. But there's many different ways that can be applied, for just the chorus alone.
Yeah, it has so many meanings in the sense that it could mean don't celebrate too early, but it could also mean don't get complacent. Again, when I make a parallel to investing, like if your stock portfolio has gone up a lot in a day, you can think you're a genius, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. And then there's almost this habit of kind of refreshing the page to say, oh, it's gone this, and now it's this, and now it's this. And it's kind of like, none of that's real and until you actually kind of take the profits. So there is this kind of element of almost like separating playing the game and then the actual performance of that. And what I do like about poker as an analogy is that most things in life are not a zero-sum game. Most things are synergistic, like everyone can win. If someone creates a new business that hasn't been thought of before, the business owner benefits, the customers benefit, the world benefits, and like nobody loses. But there are certain things that if someone wins, someone lost. And in a poker game, it's the chips at the table. And over time, yeah, there's a bit of luck, but generally it's the better player that's going to end up with all the chips. So it's a zero-sum game. And I think there are certain zero-sum games in life. And my favorite way of thinking about zero-sum is time. Like, if you spend time in one area, you can't simultaneously spend the time in somewhere else. Not unless you're trying to do two things at the same time. Generally, it's kind of like, if you're doing one thing, you're not doing something else. And what I found in a lot of clients, they're attaching a lot of their time, energy, and emotion into one thing, and just making the evaluation of that one thing without looking at the opportunity cost of how they could be spending that in something else. And I would say that's really where I changed my mentality on gambling, because I used to look at it as, if I play blackjack for an hour and I come up with $100 more at the end of the hour than I've made 100, not if my time is worth $200 an hour. Like, I've actually lost money by spending time doing that thing. And I think so many people, again, they don't look at time as that zero-sum game. So I would say there is something in that. When you said that phrase that almost like any problem could be solved with the structure of the gambler, like how would you see it working for someone with an addiction or some kind of like low mood or something like that?
Oh, low mood. Well, let's see. It's crazy. It's like we're just going verse by verse. Here it is, where it says, the secret to survive, what to throw away, know what to keep. It says, because every hand's a winner, every hand's a loser. So the best you can hope for is to die in your sleep. So so that sounds, on one end, it could sound grim. Someone who's like, in low low mood. But the there's also, I think, an element of non-attachment there, which I think many people's problems are, I know mine are for sure, but something I learned in yoga is attachment to outcome, or attachment to uh, definition, I guess, right? So the attachment of like, so a person who is um, addicted to something. Actually, I'm the addiction is not something I work with very much, so I don't want to speak too much on that. But like someone like um, who's low mood, down in the dumps, kind of thing. They're maybe they could be attaching to like, gosh, I'm 40 and what have I done with my life? They're attaching to they should be somewhere where they're not, based on something that they have put meaning into, that no one that's all their own perception, right? And so, because every hand's a winner, every hand's a loser, right?
Yeah.
So you could have if someone's attached, feeling down because they're um so I work with salespeople a lot who like are in slumps, and the idea behind what I do with them is not teaching them how to sell, because they already know how to sell. It's finding out why they no longer are selling, right? And then so it's about getting them to move an attachment away from how they're supposed to be doing. Without attachment, then they can kind of flow freely. And if you're not attaching to something, you're not putting energy into it, which is a a yogi way of saying you don't care so much. But it's just at the end of it, we're all going to die anyway.
Well, that's the key thing. It's perspective, isn't it? And
yeah.
And the interesting thing is when you zoom out, there's a helpful reframe that your miserable life is someone else's paradise. Like, so that element of, okay, you can have two aces on the, dealt to you as a hand and still lose. And you can have a 5 and a 7 and win, So again, there is that kind of ethos that actually it's not what you're dealt, it's what you do with what you're dealt, which I think is a great way of saying, okay, make the most of whatever resources you have right now. But also that contrast of, okay, what if this miserable existence that's making you so bad and feel so bad is actually, so much better than you think it is? And what if it's a winning hand rather than a losing hand, but just because you're comparing it to the wrong context? So it has that kind of elements of acceptance and commitment therapy, but also a reframe fundamentally. Like what if this thing isn't the bad cards that you think it is? And there's so many people that are saying, but my childhood and, I grew up in this kind of situation. It's kind of using the metaphor of these are the cards that I've been dealt, somehow that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to have a miserable life. And actually, no, like the amount of people that have won fortunes on bad hands should go to prove that actually it's what you do with what you've got, not what you're dealt, is the key thing.
I just thought of something, like when you said, these are the cards I was dealt. If you hear someone say that, what a great thing to say, back to them is, every hand's a winner, every hand's a loser.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. And that's the thing. It can be, and that's the excitement of life. Like, no one's guaranteed every day is going to be an amazing day, but actually, if you kind of have humility when you win, and a desire to learn when you lose, actually you get to play that game of life in a very different way than if you're kind of full of self-congratulating behavior. Oh, it's because I'm a genius. It's because I'm so good when you win. And when you lose, it's like, oh, they cheated me. This wasn't fair.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that deprives someone of the ability of becoming more competent or better or create more value for the world. So I genuinely believe that the unconscious metaphors and the belief systems really do influence like what kind of life you have. And when you change those metaphors, like the whole life changes automatically.
Yeah. And I just thought of something based on what you just said. And like I think of like, you could also the line of about not counting your money while you're sitting at the table could possibly be like you know a way of thinking about being present, rather than, because if you're counting your money, you're probably living in the future. Well, how am I going to spend this when things are happening right in front of you, right? When you were talking about like a person who goes on about how brilliant they are when they win, and then everybody cheated me when they lose. And being present, like in the here and now, and literally like what feels better in the body, losing and learning from it, that stings a little bit to lose, but okay. Or protesting the whole idea of like there's no way I lost, they cheated, and then getting angry. It's like one, there's the little, losing's no fun, right? But maybe that's about right here. But if you've got that, and then you work yourself up to I'm being cheated and all this stuff, then you've elevated the sensations in your body from here to here, which is physiologically not beneficial, right? So
yeah, you can either amplify or dilute based on the meaning that you give it. So if something bad happens and your automatic response is, yeah, everyone loses a hand every now and then. Like it's basically no big deal. Like I'm going to have a winning hand soon.
Right.
Whereas it's because they're out to get me. It's because they cheated the system. It's because it's not fair. It's full on victimhood. And
exactly.
And again, that can create these self-fulfilling prophecies. I remember a song that I did a hypnosis session, and it wasn't that long ago. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. But there's an artist, I think she's Swedish, called Sigrid, and the song title is called "Bad Life." And one of the key phrases there is basically, what if it's just a bad day, not a bad life? And I think that's such a powerful suggestion because there is a lot of people going through some dark, horrible shit.
Yeah.
And the tendency for humans sometimes is to take a period of time and then project how they feel in that moment, which might be days, weeks, months, and assume that the entire future timeline is going to be exactly like this for permanency. That's when people get suicidal ideation. That's when people seek desperation and self-medication and those kind of things. But this idea of, what if it's just temporary? What if it's just shitty now and might not be shitty in the future? And what I found from my experience is the two most powerful words when people are dealing with whether it's excess overwhelm or anxiety or just sad times, what I found at least is the two words are temporary and manageable. And if they can get themselves that this is, okay, it's temporary, it's manageable, it gets them in a more resourceful state without trying to pretend that they're not going through some horrible shit. And I think that can be quite helpful. And when I heard that song, and it's like, yeah, what if it's just a bad day and not a bad life? It's like, okay, I can turn that into a hypnosis session because all the lyrics are basically about kind of frustrating, annoying things that kind of happen. But it's like, okay, you could give that the meaning that my life is kind of cursed and kind of forever awful, or it's like this way for now. And I think that's a powerful reframe.
powerful reframe in a song, in a short song.
Yeah.
That, is, I'm sure, also available in many books that would take you a long time to read and digest. And yeah. And that's why, this, I think, the also part of like of doing, a good hypnosis session is to be, hypnotic, if you will, or, compelling. And I think that's I think certain songs and, are a good place to, I guess, practice that, or just to hear, if you're, you can make your words a little sing-songy without your client saying, "What are you singing to me now?" You don't need to do. But the I guess what my other point of that, there's so many great songs that I'm thinking about that, like, like if we were hanging out, having coffee or something, I would be that guy, pulling my son, hold on, you got to hear this one. And I would, so I'm like struggling with that right now. I think like the that and movies and, books, all three together, and are just, so powerful. And like, I think for the longest time, movies and maybe music, but not poetry, but maybe music, would have been kind of like discounted as kind of a waste of time. You should be reading, way back in the, early days. But I think, it all helps everything else. My brother was a voracious reader, and he, if I was talking about a movie, he was 9 years older than me, and if I was talking about like a movie I was watching, like the, Huck Finn or something like that, he'd just say, "Why don't you read the book?" He like would act like it was lazy of me to want to watch it on TV. I'm like, wow, but it's right here. I think I'll just watch it on TV, But yeah, it's kind of babbling at that point. But
no, I think there can be a form of intellectual snobbery, I think, around reading versus experience other forms of media. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would consider poetry highbrow and pop music lowbrow, movies lowbrow, books highbrow. But fundamentally, they're all communication vehicles that deliver a story or a message, and fundamentally, like, it's what resonates with the individual, and also what's pragmatic and practical. Like, I don't have 10 hours to read a fiction book, but I have an hour and a half to watch a movie, and equally, I think what has happened is what would have been, let's say, poetry 200 years ago, 100 years ago, has now found a vehicle that, by adding rhythm and music, because I would say song lyrics of good songs are poems, but they tend to have a bit more alliteration, a bit more rhyme, a bit more structure, and a bit more repetition, so that they're more palatable for the average person. The average person doesn't want to be trying to figure out complex meanings. They want to feel something, and they want to understand something. And you can see that in children. Like, if children are listening to music, like, they know what they like and they know what they don't like instantly. And country was never my genre, but people that like country, they really like country, and people that like EDM or rock, like, they really like those kind of things. I would say it's a double-edged sword. I remember when I was in when I was 18, 19. I'd left school, and I was probably very depressed and full of social anxiety. And my choice of music reflected my emotional state at the time. So there was lots of kind of melancholic music. And therefore, I think at some level, I was probably hypnotizing myself to stay in a fairly, kind of unresourceful state, because I wanted to listen to the music that seemed to kind of match the frequency I was feeling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, a lot of those lyrics are quite depressive sometimes if you're listening to melancholic music. So I would say there's power to it, and we've got to appreciate that can be like anything. Like there's very kind of hateful and kind of disrespectful kind of song lyrics, and then there's things that really empower people, and I would say everything is kind of like that. It's kind of like, if we accept that it has some influence, then we have to say, well, that influence can be used for good or not so good kind of things. But fundamentally, I'm a big believer in choice. And if people want to listen to music that is connecting with them at some level, like that's their prerogative. Like we shouldn't be policing and censoring this kind of stuff. But at the same time,
Right.
I think it's useful to know that if someone's listening to this right now and they're listening to music which is, based on emotional intensity, repetition, and disempowering in some way, that might be with, bigoted beliefs, or it might be with disempowering belief systems. It's kind of like, well, they're probably going to start thinking that way purely based on the repetition and emotional intensity. So we need to be kind of cautious of that.
I thought of something else is, there's that for sure. And then there's also when, somebody, quote unquote, doesn't understand the song, or they get the wrong idea behind it. And I can think of like two really huge examples, one being the song Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. That Ronald Reagan was the first to take that song, but it's got that big, bombastic chorus, that if that's where your head's at, that's what you get from it. And that itself is like how metaphors work, kind of. We can think like, I'm going to tell this metaphor which will be perfect for blank, and then it can be the client can have their issue solved through it, but like we don't necessarily know if they got the metaphor the way we intended it, or if the way the hypnotist intended it. But it doesn't really matter if they come out on the other side of it, right? Born in the USA is a curious one, because that's obviously just a case of just someone not listening to the song, or like, I mean, the first line, first kick I took is when I hit the ground, so, but probably a better example of that would be Every Breath You Take by the Police, and despite Sting seemingly, kind of annoyed, like, no, stop playing this at your wedding. This is about stalking. This is a very dark subject, like, but people are like, no, I don't, it makes me feel whatever. And the lyrics are ambiguous enough that they could mean either one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's an element of hijacking, so people can kind of give it their meaning and try and kind of utilize it for their own kind of things, or completely interpret it. It's almost like reading tea leaves. Like they see it as something entirely different. And that's the wonderful thing about things that are metaphorical, is that they shapeshift. Like what starts off as one thing becomes something entirely different for the recipient. It's almost like certain forms of art, that might be like very kind of interpretive, is kind of like people can see entirely different things in exactly the same thing. And I like that with my kind of more metaphorical hypnosis. I'll look through some of the comments, and it's kind of like, oh, someone's got entirely, I would never have guessed that they would give it that meaning, but they have. And that's kind of cool in a way, because it is that ability that it transforms and matches the person. It doesn't have to be what I intended it to be at all.
It would be really arrogant, for someone to say, no, you got that wrong. If they come out of the other end of it with something really valuable.
Yeah, I think what's fair in music is to say, this is what meaning I gave it. But it's kind of a little bit arrogant and kind of pretentious to say, you got it wrong, you've understood it wrong. It's kind of like, no, when I made it for this reason. You've interpreted that way. Okay, that's kind of cool that happened, but it wasn't necessarily the intention. And that I think acknowledges these things, because I'm sure people have heard songs like The Gambler, and what they've come away has nothing to do with poker and nothing to do. It's kind of like, knowing to hold them, knowing to fold them, and they're thinking about a toxic relationship that they should have ended early, and it has nothing to do with cards at all. That's great. That's the whole point of metaphor.
That's
you match it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. Spun this amazing metaphor of grilled cheese that I've thrown at many things. That's been really, really, really effective, and when you tell it, when you're hypnotic, when you're telling it, which is like getting back to the to the music, like puff of smoke from the rifle, I feel a bullet deep in my chest. I've risen where I've fallen. It was, I don't think it says like he fell off his horse. You know what I mean? It's just I just think there's so much value in playing, with voice inflection and rhythm and cadence and whatnot, in a session. And that, I think, is easy to find in music. I think, after this discussion, I'm coming away with the idea. I think this might be something I'm going to turn into like a presentation. And I don't know if it's something that is like a trainable sort of thing, without it being, just me saying, here are my favorite songs, listen to them. And
I think the way it becomes trainable is if it's the structure of how to find themes or storylines within any song that they can then they can use, and then yours are just examples of what you found, and then it becomes, but these are songs I relate to. You need to find songs that you relate to, and then it becomes, not purely about because otherwise, if people don't know your songs, it doesn't really kind of work. I've done a lot of talks on the Inception induction, and the very first question I ask is, who's actually seen the film Inception? And if they haven't, I have to describe it in like 2 minutes. Otherwise, the metaphor doesn't really work. And the great thing is, you don't even need to see that movie to understand my way of doing nested loops. But it's helpful if someone has, because then they've got a way to kind of map it across. So I would say, they don't need to know these songs. You could just bring the lyrics up or talk through the lyrics or play a little clip, and it's like, okay, here's what we can take from that. But I think you should do it, and if you do, I'll, if it's at Atlanta in Hypnothoughts, I'll be there and watching. So I think I'll get some value from that.
Are you? Yeah, thank you. Are you excited about the venue switch?
I am, purely for the sake of it being a change. I wasn't a huge fan of Vegas. I like the fact that it was Vegas, but equally, I've never been to Atlanta. So yeah, that will be kind of a good experience. Yeah, the fact that Hypno Thoughts is going to be in Atlanta, it's 1 week before the UK one. So that kind of does throw a little bit of a swerve ball. So it means that if I'm going to do a pre or a post, it probably makes sense that I do a pre-conference workshop rather than a post, just so there's a few days kind of in between, so I can kind of get in the right time zone before the UK one. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
You said you weren't a fan of Vegas? You seem to fit right in. I remember
it was more the people there rather than the fact that it was Vegas, because I don't really gamble, I don't drink, there's lots of things that are related to it. It happens to be in Vegas, but it's not that it was in Vegas that made it the thing. It's the fact that it's a hypnosis conference and loads of fellow hypnotists that made the appeal, not the fact that it was in Vegas.
I understand. Yeah. It's so different, isn't it? Different place, different month. Crazy.
I'm looking forward to it. So Matt, if anyone listening wants to learn more about you and what you do, and maybe, in fact, I'm going to encourage anyone listening to this, put it in the comments if you'd like to see some training on music metaphors. Comment or get in contact with Matt, because then that will inspire Matt to actually kind of turn this into a presentation that he does. So Matt, give us some contact details for you.
My website is Matt, M-A-T-T, Dickson, D-I-C-K-S-O-N, hypnosis .com. And you find me on TikTok at the Hypnotic Yogi.
Perfect. Check those out, the website or the TikTok channel. Matt, as always, great to have a chat with you, and I'm glad that we could do two things: have a chat, and then also share it with other people, because I'm sure there'll be a few people resonating with this conversation.
I hope so. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Take care.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.